In this video, I'm going to talk about the dangers of the atheistic beliefs. Dr. D. James Kennedy actually did a book. It's called What If Jesus Had Never Been Born? And this is a very interesting book. It's fascinating. All his sources, of course, they're all sourced in here. Any atheist can look this up and find out everything I'm about to say that is actually true. But it's a frightening book because it actually paints a picture of what the world was like before Jesus was born. And it was really a scary place. When you read this book, you get a better understanding of why God destroyed everything with a flood. Because back then it was even worse than what Dr. D. James Kennedy records in this book. But the atheistic thought pattern is something that's pretty frightening to me. Because according to Dr. D. James Kennedy, he can easily document, just in the last 100 years alone, since 1919, the modern age, when it began, was around 1919. Last 100 years alone, there's been about 130 million people murdered by people who accepted these atheistic belief patterns. And that's pretty frightening to me as a Christian. Now, of course, there are a lot of nice and moral atheists in the world, and there are a lot of atheists that are very nice and very moral in the United States, but primarily when you find that, it's because they are borrowing from the Christian belief patterns that have already been set up in a country. For instance, America was set up and founded based on biblical principles. Christianity was the religion of the day, still is the religion of the day for this country. And the Ten Commandments are the moral code that actually is the standard that set the basis for all the laws that are written in America. Even today, as far away from God as we become, moral codes, the laws are basically based off of the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, that kind of a thing. But an atheistic belief pattern, the reason why it's so scary is because it allows a man to set what the standard of morals are. And when you allow man to set what the standards of morals are, you really have a loosey-goosey standard. The other thing is, an atheist, he says God doesn't exist. He's trying to devalue God. And when you devalue God, you actually devalue human life. So you have to ask yourself, how could someone like Hitler kill 6 million Jews? How could communism kill and torture over 100 million people? Well, to answer that, the answer you give this question, what is a human being, determines exactly what it is that you can do to a human being. Now, since the beginning of communism, human life has been very cheap. 10 million people were killed to bring about collectivism in the Soviet Union. And if your moral standard, for instance, is to help an old lady cross the street or to run her over, that standard is determined by who's in charge if you're an atheist. But as a Christian, we have a moral standard that is actually set by God. It is always immoral to run her over. It is always a moral thing to help her across the street and help her doing whatever she's doing. But in Hitler's Germany, Hitler was somebody who admired atheism, and he certainly loved evolution. But in Hitler's Germany, you could easily run an old lady over if she's crossing the street if she was Jewish, because he set the standard. And this is a really frightening thing, something that I think atheists really should consider when they act so proud about considering themselves intellectual because they're trying to live their lives without God. So moral rights and wrongs, if a man sets them, can be pretty frightening, because the Bible says a man's heart is evil. So when man sets the standard, disaster is generally the result. Just a basic idea of some true history of people who had strong atheistic beliefs. Joseph Stalin killed about 40 million people. Adolf Hitler killed about 6 million Jews. And he also killed, something a lot of people don't know, but Adolf Hitler also killed, in addition to 6 million Jews, an additional 9 to 10 million people. A couple million of those were gypsies, and then the bulk of the rest of those were actually Christians. But Mao Zedong, he killed over 70 million people. Altogether, that's around 125 million. And then if you add in all the other communistic regimes that had a atheistic belief pattern, it's easily 130 million people or more just since 1919 who have been murdered because people consider themselves intellectual, because man set that standard, because the people who did the murdering, Stalin and Hitler and Mao, all had atheistic belief patterns where they could actually set the standard. You see, this couldn't happen with a Christian, because God has already set the standard. We are required by our beliefs and by the Bible to follow the 10 Commandments. So anyway, just some thoughts. I hope you please really consider this. Thank you.